r/NoSleep. Hosted by you/horror, Junkie123. My recently deceased wife showed up on our doorstep in the dead of night. Now I really wish she hadn't. I took a long drag from my cigarette. I exhaled and watched as the smoke billowed from my lips and dissipated into the frigid winter air. A disheveled man wearing a black button-down and matching pants shuffled over to me. "Mind if I bum one?" he rasped as I slid the pack from my pocket and extended it to him. "Have at it," I muttered despondently. He drew one from the box and produced a lighter from his slacks, flicking it a couple times before it ignited. "Thanks," he mumbled as I returned the crumpled pack to my pocket. We stood in awkward silence for a minute before I spoke. "Needed to step away for a minute. It feels like it's not even real." Tears began to blur my vision. I hurriedly wiped them away, trying my best to keep it together in front of this stranger. The man blew a thick cloud of smoke. "I know this can't be easy. Only time can heal, and even then it leaves nasty scars," he solemnly remarked, avoiding eye contact as he stared at his feet. "I know. I just wish I could have her back."
"Even if it's only for a second," I uttered, failing to hide the tinge of anguish in my tone.
I couldn't prevent the tears from flooding down my cheeks any longer. The man stroked his scraggly gray beard and sucked in on his cigarette. "Be careful what you wish for," he advised stoically. "What?" I choked out over my sniffles. "Thanks again for the cancer stick," he murmured as he trudged away. "Wait. How did you know her?" The words slipped from my mouth before I had time to catch them. "I didn't," he responded with a shrug as he disappeared around the corner. The rest of the day was a blur. The wake was exactly how she would have wanted it. It wasn't a funeral. It was a celebration of life. It didn't matter what they called it though. Nothing could mask what it really was. I numbly accepted condolences from well-meaning family members and friends. I dreaded every interaction. At the end of the day I'd received more sorries than I could count and more fruit baskets than I could eat. I began to pour myself a glass of whiskey, but stopped, substituting it in lieu of the bottle. It couldn't bring her back, but it could at least sedate me enough to put me to sleep. I awoke in a cold sweat, hyperventilating. Phew, it was all just a bad dream. Sorry if I woke you up, hon. My heart plummeted back into my stomach as reality sucker punched me in the gut. It was real. No matter how much I yearned for her, longed to hear her soft feathery voice, craved to stroke her flowing blonde hair, ached to kiss her beautiful lips, Charlene was gone. My sweet, loving, perfect wife, my best friend, my entire world, had been brutally ripped from me and I'd never get her back. Grief overwhelmed me and I cried. I sobbed and screamed, agonizing lamented wails reverberating through the empty house until my throat was hoarse and I had no tears left to cry. I scooped up the framed picture of Charlene and me on our wedding day and stared woefully at the faces beaming back at me. "Baby, I miss you. I miss you so fucking much," I whispered, kissing the photograph and clutching it close to my chest. I held it there for a long time before returning it to its spot on the nightstand. I slunk to the bathroom, sorrow replaced by hollow nothingness. I was midway through blowing into my fifth tissue when I froze. Was that a knock? I remained stock still, every muscle tense as I strained to listen for any sort of disturbance. A couple excruciating seconds ticked by. And there it was again. 3 distinct raps shattered the silence. I glanced at my phone. 3:22 a.m. Who would be crazy enough to pay me a visit at that time of night? I cautiously tiptoed to the front door, anxious trepidation creeping up my spine. I debated on whether or not I should answer when it came again. The knocks were getting louder, faster, more desperate. "Who's there?" I squeaked, cringing at how brittle the words came out. "Honey, it's me. I don't know how I got out here. Please unlock the door. It's freezing." "Char? Is that really you?" It couldn't be. I knew that. I attended her funeral just hours prior. I watched her casket descend into the dirt. But it was her voice. "Marty, please, it's so cold." That removed any doubt from my mind. Charlene was the only one who called me that. My heart fluttered. I flung open the door and stood, transfixed at the sight of my wife standing on my doorstep. I didn't question how. I threw my arms around her and pulled her into a suffocating bear hug. I wept, sloppy wet tears staining her white nightgown. A wave of unbridled relief and contentment coursed through me, alleviating all the pain I'd suffered. "Babe, is everything okay? Why are you crying?" she asked, puzzled by my sudden outburst. I clung to every word, her voice like a sweet melody to my ears. Everything is perfect, my love. I peeled open my eyelids. My gaze floated to Charlene's vacant side of the bed. Depression enveloped me once again as the pit in my stomach grew ever deeper. The dream was so vivid. I could have sworn it was actually her. I sat up in bed, prepared to go through the motions of another drab, meaningless day, when a sweet aroma collided with my nostrils. Was that? It couldn't be. I tentatively pulled away the covers and crept to the kitchen, heart slamming against my chest with each timid step. I peeked around the corner and my jaw fell to the floor. I've got to be dreaming, I mumbled to myself. In the kitchen stood my wife, humming a soft tune to herself while making breakfast. I raced over to her and swept her up, planting a tender kiss on her cheek. Hee hee, good morning, sleepyhead, she giggled. Oh, how I'd missed her laugh. Good morning, my sweet angel. I set her down and she continued to cook, a huge grin spreading across her face. My eyes shimmered as I took my seat at the table, obsessing over her every move. How'd you sleep? She asked, setting a fresh plate of eggs and bacon before me. Wonderful. How about you? I blubbered through a mouthful of food. Not that great actually. I had a nightmare that I was in a car crash. Isn't that terrible? She grimaced as she recalled it. Sweat began to dot my forehead. I set down my fork and braced myself to ask the question that had been burning at the back of my mind, gnawing at me since my wife's return. Yeah. Char, this is going to sound crazy, but... I trailed off, racking my brain for the right words. You were in a car crash. You were hit head-on by a drunk driver. You died. Do you remember any of that? She locked eyes with me, speechless at my revelation. Marty, that's not funny. Her voice quivered and her body began to tremble. I'm sorry, honey, I'm not trying to scare you, but it's true. I was beginning to regret my decision to tell her.
I need a minute, she stuttered, swiftly marching to the bedroom.
I stared blankly at her empty chair. A jumbled mess of emotions bounced around inside my chest. She would have found out eventually. But maybe I should have been more subtle? How was I supposed to know that though? It's not like there's a manual on how to break the news to someone that they're undead. I really wish she'd just forget I said that. I was mulling over our conversation, picking out my next words carefully when Charlene emerged from the bedroom. Hey babe. Why the long face? She queried, her chipper tone throwing me for a loop. Who, me? Nothing wrong here, I lied, praying she couldn't sense my growing unease. Was this her way of coping? Maybe she didn't believe me. Whatever the reason, I wasn't going to pry. She plopped back down in her seat, seemingly unfazed by the conversation we just had. Thanks for making me breakfast. I couldn't have asked for a sweeter husband, she doted, merrily scarfing down her meal. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you like it. That was strange. How did she forget that she was the one who made breakfast? I was mentally exhausted from it all, so I brushed it off and kept eating. Charlene and I spent the rest of the day cuddled up on the couch watching cheesy rom-coms on Netflix. I'm not typically one for those types of movies, but I cherished every second of it nonetheless, and that night we made the most passionate love of our marriage. I reveled in pure bliss, unabated elation flooding through my veins the entire time. I was torn from my peaceful slumber by a horrific shriek. I bolted upright, whipping my head to where Charlene sat, pain screams echoing off the walls. Charlene, what's wrong? I yelled, desperate to pinpoint the cause of her dismay. She glanced up at me, tears flowing down her cheeks. Her wails had devolved to panicked whimpers. She timidly lifted her left hand to reveal that her pointer finger was completely missing. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized that the bedsheets were caked in blood, a steady stream oozing from Charlene's open wound. I darted out of bed and snatched the first aid kit from the bathroom. I dashed back to my wife, rifling through the medical supplies in search of the gauze and bandages. As calmly as I could muster, I wrapped Charlene's gash and managed to get the bleeding under control. Come on, Char, I'll grab a bag of ice from the freezer. We're going to the hospital. Fortunately, the doctors were able to save Charlene's finger. I'd kept it on ice the whole excruciating ride to the hospital, and it was painstakingly reattached. Charlene claimed she had no clue what happened until she awoke in the middle of the night with debilitating pain in her hand. I didn't push her on the matter so that I wouldn't upset her any further. A couple days passed without incident, but I noticed that Charlene's breath began to reek. A foul odor emanated from her mouth, and no matter how much she brushed or flossed or swigged mouthwash, it did little good to mask the repulsive stench. On top of that, her memory began to rapidly deteriorate. One night I was feeling bold and tested her on it while we were brushing our teeth. Hey babe, weird question. You remember my college roommate Steve, right? I garbled through a mouthful of toothpaste. I'd roomed with Steve for a year and Charlene detested him. He was a common conversation piece prior to the crash. If she didn't remember him, I knew things would be looking bleak. She pondered for a second. "No, I don't think so," she sheepishly retorted. She spat into the sink. My stomach dropped as a tiny clink resonated through the bathroom. A dizzying lightheadedness swarmed my senses as I gently rinsed the small object and lifted it to the light. Charlene's face drained of color as a pristine white molar glinted between my fingers. She locked herself in the bathroom after that, and her muffled sobs were audible through the thin door. This was also strange. My wife was suffering and I needed answers. I frantically racked my brain for anything out of the ordinary predating Charlene's miraculous reappearance when my mind wandered to the cryptic words of the man from the funeral home. "Be careful what you wish for," I breathed. I hurriedly rushed to the living room where my suit jacket lay discarded on the love seat from a few days before. I fumbled around in the pockets, searching for something, anything that could provide me some semblance of a grasp on those bizarre events. My eyes grew wide as dinner plates as my fingers grazed something solid. I eased the mysterious item out of my blazer and held it in my palm. I fought back bile at the sight of it. In my outstretched hand lay a shriveled mummified monkey paw. It's been a month since my grisly discovery and things have only escalated. Charlene is decaying in front of my eyes and I am powerless to stop it. Both her body and mind rescind a little more each day. It's been absolute hell watching her deteriorate like this, but what can I do? I've tried everything. I'm assuming the monkey paw's arcane magic has run dry because none of my wishes to halt her descent have been granted. Trashing it isn't an option. Every morning it reclaims its spot in my jacket like it was never gone. I tried burning it, tossing it in a wood chipper, I even doused it in sulfuric acid. No effect. The thing that terrifies me the most though, that gnawing itching notion that truly robs me of sleep, is that the night I got my wife back, I silently wished that she was pregnant.